I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am recording this podcast today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and recognise their continuing connection to the land's water and culture. I pay my respects to their elders of the past, present and emerging. Hello and welcome to Unstress. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Well, today we are going to explore ecology. Now let's just do a quick definition of what that word means. It is the study of the relationships between living organisms, including humans, and their physical environment. But today we are going to be talking about body ecology. That is the relationship of living organisms on us, on and in us. And we have such an intimate relationship with them. In fact, one could argue that everything you do, everything you consume, everything you put on your skin, you should be asking the questions, are you feeding your friends or your foes? Because if you're feeding your friends, as in healthy bacteria and microbes, then you are probably going to be a hell of a lot healthier than if you are feeding your foes. Those bacteria that throw us out of balance, those microbes that throw us out of balance and cause chronic disease. We have, as you will hear, and you've heard this many times on my podcast, we've had a very adversarial approach to microbes in our world, whether we're talking about antimicrobial lotions, potions, toothpastes, surface cleaners, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. We have tried to eliminate microbes, and it's been a great selling tool for selling products for many, many years. The problem is we have been trying to dominate what we really should be enabling and befriending. And this is a very important relationship which we need to get right. And that's why today we are talking about body ecology. And my guest today, I'm really excited to welcome back to the show, Maria Hunt. Maria is a passionate and enthusiastic advocate for good health. After years of suffering with many health issues herself, Maria jumped headlong into researching for the missing answers, and answers is what she found. And she is sharing many of those with us today. She discovered the missing link in fermented foods, a unique and natural process combining beneficial bacteria and a selection of raw, organic, whole foods to create a nutrient-dense, enzyme-rich, probiotic superfoods. She talks about the 7 principles of body ecology and also lines up 3 very important ducks for us to enjoy good health. Look, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Maria Hunt. Welcome back to the show, Maria.
Thanks, Ron. Pleased to be here.
Maria, there's so much I wanted to talk to you about today. I know body ecology has been a very big part of your professional journey. And I wanted to dive in first up and ask you, what is the body ecology? What is body ecology diet?
That's it, Ron. Okay, so body ecology, it's a system of health and healing, and it was created by Donna Gates in the US, initially developed as an anti-candida diet, given that overgrowth, as you know, of candida and is such a big problem for many health imbalances, including, fatigue, depression, weight gain, early aging, ADHD, thyroid, adrenal issues, and autoimmune. All of those are directly related to candida imbalance. And Donna herself, she wanted to find a cure to her own candida-related health issues that she was suffering from for many years. And she was so frustrated with conventional medicine. So over time, she studied many different protocols from macrobiotics, Chinese medicine, natural hygiene, raw foods, mega supplement therapies, and she incorporated the best components of each into body ecology. And it's helped thousands and thousands of people overcome candida. And in doing that, that really helps build their immune system. And she found too the best way to control both digestive issues and systemic candida overgrowth is to follow the 4 steps of body ecology that she designed. And one that I find so interesting, one that gets overlooked, is to create energy. We need all the energy that we can get to get well. And
Yeah.
we need to strengthen our energy organs like our thyroid and adrenals. And in doing that, that allows us not only the foundation to get well, but the ability to stay well. The second step is to correct digestion, correcting any nutritional deficiency, restoring gut health. The third one is to conquer infections, to bring all infections, including fungal, parasitic, viral, all of those ones under control. And that will help strengthen the immune system and protect us in future for any more infections. And the last one was to cleanse toxins. And cleansing can have a huge impact on our adrenals. And if we've got an overburdened liver, that can make it almost impossible to bring the adrenals, our energy organs, back into balance. So to support that, we need to give that extra liver detox support. You know, we use herbs, supplements, or far infrared machines, colonic irrigation. And as we know, having a healthy bum is paramount. Which
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. You know, Maria, you are, as I said to you when we were talking about the catching up again, I said, you'll take this in the spirit in which it's meant.
Love it.
You know, I love talking to you about bums and poo, and we're going to get onto that. But it's so interesting because, Donna, this has been now going on for over 20 years?
Yes, well over 20 years.
Well over 20 years. And we have really come to understand that our relationship with bacteria is just so fundamental to our health.
It's everything.
It's everything.
It's just the baseline for all our health issues now, Ron. And that's what I love about research is catching up. And just as a side note, I also wanted to add in there, unfortunately, around 85% of women have a vaginal infection when they give birth, and they can pass on those dangerous pathogens to their baby. So babies today who have an excess, amount of pathogens when they're born, they start out with gas, colic, bloating, reflux, cradle cap, which is potential yeast infection. And they can also have infant constipation. And they don't develop the necessary immunity, and they don't have the ability to actually cleanse out those, inherited toxins from their parents and grandparents. And in DNA research, that's called transgenerational toxins. And if a mother has low adrenals, she can actually draw on the adrenal hormones of the fetus in the third trimester. And then the baby can be born with exhausted adrenals. And that leads into food allergies, constipation, compromised gut, right from the get-go. And you hit this vicious cycle. And that's what Body Ecology aims to break that cycle.
Yes, well, and the other thing is we've had, while we've realized the importance of the microbiome, we've had this adversarial approach to bacteria everywhere. I mean, in the soils, in the gut, in our mouth, in our skin, in our surfaces, everything. And so when we think about who might be susceptible or benefit from something like this ecological approach to our bodies, it kind of suggests almost everybody.
Everybody is.
Everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, we've certainly all heard about the microbiome now and our microbes. And these microbial communities within our gut, they're pivotal to our overall health. So humans, plants, other animals, they all have microbiomes. And this is fascinating because each microbiome are individual to that organism. And each organism, it just varies hugely between each one. The diversity is there. So in humans, where, for example, as you said, we have our skin, lungs, and the gastrointestinal tract all have separate microbiomes. And the combination of these make up the unique imprint for each individual person. And they make up trillions and trillions of bacteria, viruses, yeast, and parasites. They're all living in our digestive tract, but mostly our colon. And what's so interesting, we have 10 times as many microbial cells as human cells. And that's
mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah. So we've got to get them back into balance. And it's so exciting now because the microbiome is getting the recognition that it deserves, because it's considered as the newly discovered organ, the second brain. And Dr. Michael Gershen's research around that nerve cells in the gut that act as a brain that's groundbreaking. And that can actually control, that the second brain can actually control our gut all by itself. We didn't have this years ago. And if you've got that second brain disturbance, then we're looking at depression, anxiety, weight gain, autoimmunity, digestive issues, skin conditions, many, many more. And so many people, as in your wonderful book where you're talking about stress, they're having stress and the convenience of junk foods, and they're having these digestive issues. They've got gas and bloating and indigestion. All of those are common, but people are starting to accept that as the default position. Yeah. And when you have that, then they're pushed to try, prescription medications to solve these issues. And there's certainly a time and place for medical intervention. But Body Ecology has alternate suggestions that won't include putting a Band-Aid on these underlying issues. And Donna, she's geared for this one fundamental law of nature, the fact that our digestive system is intimately linked to our immune system, endocrine, circulatory, and our central nervous system. And they're profoundly affected with all these interlocking systems in the amazing world of beneficial microbes. And I just love these guys.
Yeah. And I love, and this is a recurring theme on this podcast, about enabling nature rather than trying to dominate nature. But interestingly, Maria, I heard an interview recently from my nephew on his podcast, Mouthing Off, with a gastroenterologist.
I love that, mouthing off.
Yes, who Lewis asked him, is the gut the second brain? Which is exactly what you've just said. And he said, I disagree with that, Lewis. And I thought, that's going to be so interesting. Yeah. But he went on to say it's actually the first brain.
Yeah.
Because when you look through evolution at organisms before they actually had brains, they always had a gut.
Always had a gut.
And it was the gut that drove so much of their of what they were doing. So he actually went one step further and said the gut is the first brain. I loved it. I loved it. Listen, I know that there are 7 basic principles in body ecology. Have you already covered 4 of them? Or is there, what do we go over those?
Okay. So our first principle is is the principle of expansion and contraction.
Okay.
And our body is always seeking balance. For instance, if we're eating too much salt, our body becomes too contractive. And when we're too contractive, we go within. And then what happens is we want to balance that. We crave something sweet. So think of Christmas time when we overindulge in Christmas cake and puddings and sweets. We start to crave that healthy, balanced meal. So when we understand this principle, we can create a balance and we can avoid that vicious cycle of cravings and weight gain. And that's where body ecology with this principle aims to eat more in the middle of the continuum, the neutral area. So some of those foods are, our raw and cooked veggies, salads, soaked almonds, or seed-like grains like quinoa, millet, amaranth, etc. That helps to neutralize and balance the body. The second principle is the principle of acid alkaline. Too much acidity in the body, as you know, being a dentist with the teeth, etc., can really have harsh effects, and it can lead to yeast, viruses, cancers, parasites, allergies, all of these different assaults on our body. But alkaline foods, they don't feed yeast or parasites, and they actually rebuild our immune system. So in this section, we talk more about alkaline foods to balance the system. And also, again, with stress, prescription drugs, not getting enough sleep, that potentially creates an imbalance in that acid alkaline. And it also, too, we need to balance out our lifestyle. That's the key to good health. The third principle that Donna goes on to is about uniqueness. And I love this one because everyone's unique. We've all got different demands on our time and our bodies, and we change over time. So we need to listen to how we feel when we start changing our foods around and reflect on what's working and what's not working. Because what can work for you may not work for me. It's what works basically for you that will help you carry on and move through the changes. And most people are suitable to this protocol: raw foodies, vegans, vegetarians, omnivores, and we can accommodate for individual needs. The the fourth principle is the principle of cleansing, which we love because we get into it with a healthy bum. Thankfully, we cleanse every day through elimination, urine, tears, and sweat. If we didn't, we would be up the creek. We really need to get these toxins out. And also, too, when we have fevers, colds, skin outbreaks, they're a natural part of cleansing. And we shouldn't suppress them because it allows us to come back into balance. And when you first start the diet, you may feel worse initially, but hang in there because we're cleansing out the toxins. And also cleansing the colon is a must. We must get the old waste out in order to let the new nutrients be absorbed in the body. And we have the probiotics that we're introducing, the fermented foods, and they need to attach themselves onto the colon wall. And for nutrients to be absorbed in the body, we need that healthy, clean colon. So don't skip that step, cleanse the colon. You can use flax tea on a short term, laxative herbs. You can use colonic irrigation and enemas, but you've got to have a healthy bowel. The fifth principle is the principle of food combining. If we have a weak digestive system, eating poorly combined foods causes a negative fermentation process. And in doing that, that produces alcohol and sugar as a response in our body. And that in turn feeds pathogenic yeast and creates the toxins. So for instance, when we have meat and potatoes together, we can have the meat, but not with potatoes, have it with non-starchy veggies, cauliflower, broccoli, and have the potatoes, but have that with seed-like grains of quinoa and millet. And because you're properly combining those foods to take the pressure off the digestive system. And when you eat poorly combined foods, you can actually secrete enzymes that cancel each other out, for example, with the meat and potatoes. And this principle is wonderful for weight loss. I use it all the time. It really helps me to balance my own weight. And for my clients, it's so effective and it truly works. The sixth principle, that's the one, the 80-20. There's two concepts to this to aid in our digestion. Firstly, overeating. It severely weakens our digestive system. So we only eat until our stomach feels about 80% full. And when we do that, we leave room for the digestive juices to come in and do its job. Secondly, we need to balance our nutrients. 80% of our plate should be land or ocean veggies and 20% a grain starch or a protein. And that can take the pressure off the gut. And the last one, the seventh principle, is the principle of step by step. We need to understand that the body takes time to heal. You can't expect instant healing, but when we make small, consistent changes, that gives our body the foundation it needs to support our long-term health that we're, so desperately after. And we need to incorporate, say, one healing principle at a time so that you don't get overwhelmed. And when you're patient and you give the diet time, it needs to heal the body, then we notice a subtle difference and it gets stronger and stronger.
What sort of a time frame should we be looking at? People are so impatient with things, but let's put a reality check on this. And what kind of time frame should people be expecting?
That's why pharmaceutical meds, I think, one gets such a, are so popular because it's take a pill, get the, the response, but that's not always, that's band-aiding. We need to come back and get the foundation. So it's different for everyone, but 3 to 6 months, the first step in stage one and rebuilding and going through that can take, say, a couple of months. And then after that, you'll be noticing changes all of the time. And then you'll go on for another couple of months. And what happens is you get into a deeper and deeper cleanse. So when you get into that deeper cleanse, you're removing old inherited toxins. So between, say, 3 and 6 months, you can really notice a vast difference.
And we're talking about a habit for life here too. We're not talking about this is just, this is a program for 3 to 6 months and then you go back to the way you were. I think that's an important one. Intermittent, when you talk about overeating, I'm guessing that intermittent tell to us what's your view of intermittent fasting or a good protocol, or is it a good protocol? I don't know. I
think, again, coming back to the principle of uniqueness, everyone is different. It works so well for some people, maybe not for others. So we've got to get into the middle of the continuum and find what works for us. I personally find it's great for my body. I quite, enjoy it. And but for some others, if they've got really weak adrenals or their thyroid is compromised, it can be a struggle for them. So yeah, I really enjoy it. You've got to take the pressure off the gut.
Mm-hmm. That's really powerful. And the other one is the role that healthy fats play in making that easier. What's the body ecology view of fats?
Of fats. Okay, so we're all after good fats. We want to get rid of the bad fats. But it's coming back into what we were going to talk about with the microbiome. Is that, right, so I'm going to jump back into this.
No, come back. Yep. Go back to it. Yep.
Go back with uniqueness, okay? Everyone is unique. So what I like to do is you can get in and get your genetic composition, your genes tested, and that plays a really important role, especially with fats, because each individual person is different. So with that, how can these genes help us especially around fats? Well, researchers reported 63 genetic variants that increase the risk of obesity when eating saturated fat. So if you've inherited variants in certain genes, then these saturated fats from animals, they're not good for you. If you have these variants, you'll absorb more fat from your meal than the other person, and you'll naturally struggle then with weight gain. And this was so fascinating. A research from the University of Chicago stated for some people with these variants, again, uniqueness, a high saturated diet actually kills trillions of good microbes in the gut, especially bifidus. And that allows pathogenic bacteria, one in particular, Wadsworthy, to flare up. And it produces a toxic substance and it inflames the gut lining, even causing leaky gut. So eating for your genes is really important. Donna is all about getting the good fats in, getting the trans fats out, getting all of that, having the healthy fats, but then get your genes tested and know exactly where you stand as far as those fats.
Because we are headed towards a more personalised form of medicine. So this third principle of uniqueness is just so fundamental. Yeah. Where are we at with gene testing? What's your view of that?
Which I love it. I've done myself. So I've done 3 generations just of my family, and it's been fascinating to see the effect of the genes coming through. I encourage my clients to get the genes done. And what it does, it just takes the pressure off. For instance, I have a vitamin D receptor. I have a SNP there. So I can go out in the sun as much as I like, but I'm not going to be like, say, you who's got, or your SNPs lined up for your vitamin D, I'm not going to absorb it as sufficiently. So I do need vitamin D supplementation. So once I know my variants there, then it makes life so much easier. And what I love too, Ron, is intuitively, you get this feeling of like, I need, certain fats. And I don't do coconut oil very well, or olive oil. I have issues with that with my genes.
Yeah.
So, and intuitively always knew where I'd had olive oil, and it's great. It's a wonderful, healthy, oil for many people, but not for me. So,
when you talk about SNPs, because I know what you're talking about, but it's a kind of tell us SNPs are.
Well, they're the variants, okay? So you can have, your genes. Say if we have, you'll have a negative gene as such, and then you'll have a positive gene, and you'll have one that sits in the middle. And they bring it back to, I use Smart DNA, Dr. Margie Smith's, for instance. We've got red, amber, and green. So it's just meaning there could be, it's out of balance there. So remember, genes are not going to run our life. You can turn genes on and off. And that's a big thing for people to remember. You don't want to get caught up in thinking, oh no, I've got that gene, that's it, life's over. No.
Yeah. This is that wonderful new science of epigenetics, where you are actually not a victim to your genes. But the type of gene testing you're talking about is not the 23andMe thing. It's a lot more detailed than that.
It is. And Donna actually designed the gut gene connection, and she called it the cracking the code with nutritional genomics, along with, she did a summit, The Genius of Your Genes. And you can find that actually on the Body Ecology website.
Wow. Okay, so tell me, how do we know when we are out of balance? How do we know that?
How do we know? Okay, so when we're out of balance, you'll be having symptoms such as gas, bloating, burping, belching, those irregular bowel motions, itchy bottom, sugar cravings, a 3 o'clock slump, that athlete's foot, a potential yeast imbalance, dry, itchy skin, abdominal bloating. We can carry 3 to 4 kilos of impacted fecal matter in the abdominal regions, foggy brain. All of those and many more are signs. They're like an oil light flashing. And we can have 1, 2, or 3 of these symptoms. But your body's trying to tell us that we're out of balance. But for many people, we cover up this oil light flashing and hope for the best. And then we drive 20 Ks down the road, and then, the car breaks down. Then we've got the audacity to get out kicking and screaming, saying it's let us down. But it's been wanting us to take heed for quite a while. So listen to the oil light flashing, listen to what's going on in your body. Don't just accept it as a default position or blame family genetics. These signs are there for a reason. And if you don't have any of these symptoms, that's wonderful. But protect the health that you do have.
And for children, are those kind of the signs with kids as well? Is there much difference between adults and kids in terms of knowing whether we're out of balance or not? I mean,
not that much of a difference, Ron. And the kids, they intuitively know when they're out of balance. They're when they're there and they're just all out of sorts, they're affected by parasites. Like, I know this sounds wild, but in the full moon, that activates the parasitic effect on a child. So lots of mothers or parents will bring their children into me, and they're saying, such and such. I'd mentioned to them about the full moon. They say, yeah, the kids have got the itchiest bottom. They're just going berserk. They've got ratty behavior. So listen to what our bodies are telling us.
Which actually brings me to a topic that I mentioned I'm looking forward to talking to you about, because I often say to patients, we get a report card each and every day, and we should be listening to it. Tell us about a healthy bum, and tell us what your poo actually says about you.
Oh, I love it, Ron. Don't we just cut straight to
we always talk about this, and I can't think of anybody I'd rather talk. I said this to my wife last night. I said, I'm so looking forward to talking to Maria, and she will take this in the spirit in which it is meant. But it is true. It is true, isn't it? I mean, it's hopefully something we each do at least once a day.
Oh, at least. We've got to talk about the infamous healthy bum. After all,
let's talk about a healthy bum, and then we'll talk about what our poo tells us. Go on. Yeah. Tell us about a healthy bum.
Growing up with 9 boys, I'm well versed on the conversation surrounding the bum. So let's have a look at a good stool. So it's 3/4 water, and that's why our stools are soft and they're normally easy to pass. So it should be effortless, and it should take about the same time as to have a pee. So the piece de resistance, or the perfect log, is the shape of a banana with a smiley end. It's medium brown walnut in colour, with a small diameter, and it's well formed, and together with minimal smells. So no burning matches afterwards, guys, none of that. And that's what you should deliver to your toilet bowl at least twice a day. And Ron, the launch is so important, as a healthy log should easily release, and then it should float and then gently subside. That's our perfect landing. And how good does that feel when you can fully eliminate and pass 2 good logs? And I bet you'll never go to the loo again without checking out the toilet bowl, because
I think you should.
That's right. Those healthy logs, they determine our digestive tract. And as we remove those toxins, we really need to feel good and look good and have that energy and motivation to live the life that we want. So that's all in the perfect launch. What about the not so desirable outcomes? What do they actually come down to? Well, in this report card, if you're having a bowel motion only 1 to 3 times a week, that's hard and solid, it's like you've got, constipation. And it's not so, constipation isn't such a lack of bowel motion, but it's the hardness of the stool. If there's a lot of pushing and straining, the bowel can be out of kilter. That slow movement could be viruses, infections, stress, adrenal exhaustion. If you're passing pebbles or rabbit droppings, that could be more dehydration, liver imbalance, and also could be lack of enzymes. Or if we're passing the bunch of grapes or the corn on the cob style, again, constipation. And if you've got mucus present, that can be indicative of inflammation. We want to avoid loose, watery, porridge-like stools. That diarrhea effect can relate back to a viral infection, parasite, and we're losing valuable nutrients. And if it's greasy and leaves a film in the bowl, that can be a sign that you've got an inability to actually absorb nutrients and break down fats, or you may have a pancreas imbalance. And the colour, super important. If that bowel motion is dark, that can be a sign of blood and in your digestive system. So you need to get the GP to check that one out. And the same if it's red, unless you've eaten beetroot. Any of those, the fresh blood in the stool can be indicative of hemorrhoids or something sinister. So GP time. If they're pale yellow or grey, that can be related to the gallbladder, liver and undigested fats. You could have a bile deficiency. If the stools are green, you could be having lots of green leafy veggies and smoothies, that's okay. Or it's moving through the intestines too quickly and skipping that bile breakdown. It could also mean too you're having antibiotics. If you've got food particles in your stool, that's a sign that you're not absorbing your food properly. And so again, you may be low in hyaluronic acid, you may have a viral infection. So we don't want to see, especially with the kids, no carrots or peas, should be coming through. And the bowel motion shouldn't be offensive. There's no foul smelling stools because that can be a buildup of toxins and undigested foods just sitting there going rancid and putrid. So we want it really just minimal smell. Now, our launch or our failure to launch. If we're launching out our magical, two happy piece de resistance stools a day, if it does a submarine dive, that's a sign of undigested fibre and foods. So you may need more enzymes. If we launch and it stays floating, again, kids have a lot of this, then that's a sign of undigested fats. And it can be really helpful for all of us to use, like we call it squatty potty, if you want to. That gets the correct angulation for the bowel to release. And it helps if we've got our knees above our hips. So I always say, for families, just pop it in the bathroom and use it. Because our bodies, it's a constant juggling act. We've got to deal with over 6 billion microbes inside our mouth with 700 different species. Then we've got over 100 trillion microbes in our digestive system. I think that's 300 to 500 different species. And then we've got, 1.5 trillion microbes on our skin. And that's 1,000 different species that we know of at the moment. So we are living, breathing microbes. They run us. We don't run them. So if you want to have this healthy body, you've got to have the healthiest bum.
Yes, wow. Maria, you can't believe it. There's so much there. I mean, if people aren't reading the show notes for this, because you've got to go back and have a real close listen to that, because that is absolute gold. I mean, you've said so much there that is just so important. And we get this, we go off for all these expensive lab tests and blood tests, and you could go and get your genes tested, and I know that's a worthwhile thing to do, but we get this report card every day.
It's there for free.
It's there for free. It's there for free. And actually, you mentioned the squatty potty, and I have to say, I was exploring this in my book, and it's surprising how much research there is about that actual position. And when you think about it, for the last few million years, before Western toilets came along, and hey, I'm a huge fan of Western toilets.
But a time and place.
There's a time and place, but actually this little stool or squatty potty changes things as well. Wow, fantastic! I love it. And this is it's a bit self-indulgent, Maria, but I knew I needed that refresher, if you like.
We all need a refresher.
We do. And the Bristol stool chart, kind of. Do you think that's a what do you think? Yeah. Well,
just use that as a guide.
A good guide.
The main thing is, Ron, is for people to check every day. People just go, oh, that's too embarrassing. It's like, you know, I don't have worms. Everyone has worms. Kids, we all have worms.
Yeah,
You've got to deal with it. I'm from the country. I know
yeah,
all of this
yeah.
stuff. So you've got to have a healthy bum.
No, and it's not as though you need to be embarrassed, because very few of us call the whole family or neighbourhood in to, you know, come on in, have a look at this. No, I can only imagine. Listen, this has been so fabulous. And now I know you talk about good health. Let's finish on a positive note here, because I love the fact you've identified 3 ducks of good health, and you've touched on some of these along the way. But I wondered whether we might just focus on this as a sort of a parting message for our listener.
Yeah. So our 3 ducks of good health. And we need a balancing, a mineral-rich alkaline body with a healthy microbiome. We need to line these 3 ducks up. And when we've got that, we are really humming along. But firstly, where have all the minerals gone, Ron? As you know, with your wonderful podcast with both the Charlies, Arnott and Massey, our soil biome is struggling. And because of these issues, many people today are literally starving from mineral deficiencies. In fact, mineral deficiencies can be at the root of every serious issue there. The US Department of Ag study shows 25 to 80% decline in the mineral content of foods consumed due to over-farming, chemical fertilizers, and an increased consumption of processed foods. They're being stripped from our important, you know, the foods have been stripped from these important minerals. So Australia isn't far behind. Research reports a significant fall in soil mineral deficiencies in Western Australia. And in some cases, we have to eat significantly more food today to get the same nutrients our parents got in the past. It's sad but true. Basically, we're overfed and undernourished. No matter where you look, we're losing energy. I mean, people drink the amount of coffee, I can't believe it is so insatiably trendy. Years ago, Australia wasn't the big coffee drinker that it is today. And that's great. Have your coffee, enjoy that. But we're going from coffee to energy drinks, even kids and teens. They're looking for this quick energy boost to get through the day. So that's why Donna came back and she developed Body Ecology supplement called Ancient Earth Minerals. And that's fantastic at helping to restore a mineral-rich body. And it's got the highest quality blend of humic and fulvic minerals out there. And so what I had this, you'll love this, interestingly, I was talking to a cattle producer the other day, and he was asking me for minerals for himself. Because when we got talking, he said because he'd had such great success with his maiden heifers, he'd given them minerals in his water trough prior to calving, and it was really good for dehydration, ease of calving, and fast recovery, great for their feet, less abscesses. He was so impressed, he wanted it for himself and his family. So you've got to love nature. So minerals, super important. Our second duck is alkaline. The body thrives in a slightly alkaline state. And research states too much acidity, which comes from stress, poor diet, poor sleep patterns, all of those, you know, acidic foods, too much meat and dairy and processed foods, that allows yeast and chronic bacterial infections and parasites to take over. So we want to, and when you're eating those highly acidic diets, they rely on your alkaline mineral reserves, known as these alkaline buffers, to attempt to balance the acidity. And when this occurs, when we use that, that results in nutrient leaking from the actual body. So we want to get back into balance. And this is where Body Ecology comes in as a solution. This protocol, and I don't really like using the word diet. It's more of a way of living. It's set around 80% alkalizing foods, along with probiotic-rich cultured foods, ocean veggie, grain-like seeds, quinoa, millet, amaranth, lemons, limes, the Body Ecology probiotic drinks, cocoa biotic, energy biotic, passion fruit biotic. All of those go to alkaline the system. And then, as we spoke about earlier, the third duck is the healthy microbiome.
Wow. And I guess with the minerals, we've had a kind of a double whammy there, in the sense that our soils are so deficient in it because of us trying to dominate the microbes in the soil. but also this demonization of salt.
Yes.
What
Yes.
are your thoughts on salt?
Everything got to be good quality salt. That's Donna is very big on that. She is very much connected to Selena's sea salt over in the States. She knows it's clean. A lot of so-called, sea salt, it's like anything that becomes trendy now with the marketing, etc. A lot of it is bastardized. You need to get the quality sea salt. And I'm all for sea salts. Wonderful. Get them balanced.
Maria, thank you so much for today. We've covered some great territory there. I also, we're going to have links to your site and the Body Ecology site where people can explore those 7 principles and line those 3 ducks up. So, thank you again for today.
That's a pleasure and good to catch back up again, Ron.
Thanks, Maria. Now, as I have said many times, we do get this report card in every single day, which gives us a clue as to how healthy we are, how our digestive system is doing, whether we are in good balance with our microbiome. This is free, it is accessible, and if you are in good health, you are getting this report card at least once or twice a day. And as Maria so eloquently pointed out, what our poo says about you, or what your poo says about you rather, is a really important thing to take notice of. Now, we mentioned the Bristol stool chart, and I'll have links to that. I think you can easily Google it. It gives you 7 different types of stools and a hint as to where you are on the scale from diarrhea to severe constipation and everything in between. It's worth mentioning that over the age of 50, the fecal occult blood test, which the government sends out to everybody over the age of 50 and is done every 2 years, is a really important test for you to do and take seriously. If the results are negative, well, that's obviously great. But if they are positive and blood has been detected in your stool sample, then do take that seriously as well and follow your doctor's instructions. That's very, very important. Look, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I certainly did. I just think Maria is a wealth of knowledge and such a great communicator, and really laid out those 7 principles of expansion, contraction, acid alkali, the importance of uniqueness. This is something that we're going to hear a hell of a lot more about, and that is personalized medicine, cleansing, which in this modern world is something we need to do often. And this is why sweating is important. This is why getting out in the sun is important. This is why having detox baths like with Epsom salts, and we did that program on magnesium, and Epsom salts is a great source of magnesium, but there's a whole other story there about food combining. When you think of some of the things we find on our plate, and you do kind of wonder, what a great collection of food, but is my body really going to be able to cope with all this? My eyes lit up when Maria talked about the 80-20 rule, because actually that's how I go through my life. And that is, I try to make 80% of what I do in my life good for my health. And I recognize that we live in a real world, and this may shock many of my listeners, but no, not even I am perfect. So 20% of the time, I may not be as good as I could be. When I'm really on fire, I'm 90-10. And if I was ever 100%, which I have been at various points in my life, I have alienated so many of my family and friends, I'm not even sure I want to go there. And to be patient, do this step by step, and realize that this is also a habit for a lifetime. This is about life in general. We hear this recurring theme to be persistent and be kind. I know Lala Mason mentioned that when we were talking about fussy eaters, when I was talking to Sarah Woodhouse about trauma and getting in touch with our feelings, to be persistent and kind. When you're changing your sleeping habits, and don't get too stressed out about the fact that, in fact, sleep is the most important part of the day. There it is. I made you stress again. But to be persistent and kind with yourself, and to be step by step in this 7th principle of the Body Ecology reminds us to be persistent and kind and patient. Look, that was a great episode, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Don't forget to leave us a review. Have to remind you about that. Leave us plenty of reviews. We're going to get this podcast out and global. Well, it is actually global, but even reaching more people. Also, hook up to our webpage and see what we have got in store. We've got some great online courses coming in the second half of this year. So register your interest for that. In the meantime, you could go online and do our health assessment tool based on the 5 pillars of health and wellness. So I hope that finds you well. Until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health, and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner. Guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences, and conclusions.